Hi guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. We help Muslims and non-Muslims alike to understand and handle Islam in the 21st century. We consider ourselves to be decent human beings, so we condemn categorically any abuse, oppression, misogyny, slavery, violence, anything like that. We do embrace, however, free speech and also criticism, even if it is directed at us, if it is factual and constructive criticism. We focus on Islam exclusively. So if you're curious about anything Islam, you've come to the right place. Now, we don't attack, which is aggressive, destructive, and antagonistic, neither Islam nor Muslims. We ask questions and show facts. We refute false claims and present the reality of Islam, which is political Islam. We inspect, investigate, research, analyze, and then report and critique on Islam, the ideology, not the people. Now, the live stream goes to YouTube and Facebook, and there are three ways that you can participate in this. Either you join us in the live written chat, you can join the panel during the live show, or later on watch and comment the archive. And anyone can join to comment, critique, contribute, or question. This is not a Dawah channel with censorship. Don't go to Patreon, don't go to PayPal. Everything here is free. The way we work is usually we have some news, some Krazy Komments, a segment where we go and read the Quran, and then a discussion on the theme of the month, followed by integrating the live chat, ending with a Hadith of the week. If this is not enough Islam for you, there's still the Discord channel where you can discuss with us without anything being recorded. See you later and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show on this gorgeous 19th of March, a Friday. It is 20 p.m. UK time, and we're here to talk about Islam. We've had a wonderful week, and what has happened in the UK? How is COVID doing in the UK, Rob?
Yeah, good evening to you and to Nick and to all the viewers and those who will watch later on. I'm not following it that closely in the sense of I know that at some point they're going to announce a sort of a tiered reopening of things, but certainly not at the moment. People are back at school, but other than that, everybody's still in a lockdown over here.
And Nick?
Yeah, no, I'm
what
just
is
laughing
your
at.
comment?
Yeah, no, we're trying to roll out vaccines here, and our government, let's just say they're not doing the most efficient job, but that's a whole different topic. But yeah, we're still on lockdown. Schools are open with various limitations, and we're still waiting for vaccines to come out.
Yeah, my father's getting over it slowly, but he's got the British variant, and unfortunately, it lingers. It's now 3 weeks, and he's still sort of not quite over it. In other words, he's still contagious to a minor extent, but they still say, no, you need to be careful, still not take risks and things like that. But he's asymptomatic, so that's cool. So we're looking at shots now, just like our Mona Lisa is. So that's the good news. Italy is looking for lots of shots as well. They've really been hit hard. My goodness. Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the people who are joining us, who are watching us live, and who are giving us, I don't know, it's sort of ideas, comments. They're discussing, they're going crazy there, and it's very nice to see that we have people there who are watching. I remember the days when I was like on my own, and maybe there was one or two people or something, and because there was really no more interest because we covered everything. And now, yes, it is still the case. We've covered everything, and it's very difficult to reinvent yourself and to come up with new ideas. Anyway, welcome everybody. It's the Gin and Tonic Show. We've given you the structure. We're going to be talking about a couple of things today. And as always, we're going to start off with the inspiration of the week. The inspiration this week is, and He is with you wherever you are. And that is straight from the Quran. I don't know why this is supposed to be inspirational. I know that you can twist it and say, oh, he's with you and you're not alone, and wherever you walk in the dark forest, there's going to be Allah with you. But is he also with me when I'm inside Ali or something like this? And it can get quite freaky. Because a lot of people tell me, oh, well, Allah knows everything. And then I ask them, well, does he also know what it's like to have gay sex? So, these are the questions of how does he know what exactly it's like in hell? How much time has he spent there? So these are the funny questions. So these inspirational memes are not always so straightforward in my eyes anyway. So I'm never quite sure whether to take them seriously or not. So.
Yeah, and presumably that's part of a verse as well, 54:7. We'd have to bring it up and see what the context is. But some Muslims, again, not all of them, will say something like to the Christians, for example, oh, did Jesus go to the toilet? Did Jesus have a crap, or whatever the case is? Did God go to the toilet or have a crap? But that's obviously a simplistic and uncharitable interpretation. But then one could ask the same about this, right? Is Allah with you when you're having a crap, or whatever the case is? Or because if he's with you at all times, then, is he allowing evil to occur when, he could at least dissuade you in some way or bring it to your attention that what you're doing might be wrong. So, exactly. I think it causes some problems, that sort of, sentence, but we'd have to look at the full one to see what the context is.
I've got two items when it comes to news. One is more tongue-in-cheek, because I read now that there's questions to Muslims who worship their creator/God. And somebody asked, well, why do Muslims worship their creator God? Well, because it created them. And we know all this. And why did it create them? Well, so that they worship it. So this is the circular reasoning. Why do Muslims worship their creator? Because it created them. Why did it create them? So that they worship it. And so on and so forth. So it's quite funny that you think that a God who doesn't need worship, who doesn't need human beings, who doesn't need any of that, should go and create them. I mean, why would I create something if I have no need for it?
And I got a quick question, because did he make a mistake? Because if obviously he created people to worship him, obviously everyone should be worshiping him. And obviously we don't. So are we three like the mistakes that he made, or?
Well, no.
Well, it depends what you want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. This is if you want to do devil's advocate, you can go into the test mode, and Rob is going to lead you down into that rabbit hole until you get sick and tired of it.
I mean, a Muslim could just say something like, we have all been created to worship him. Some of us are denying it, either in unrighteousness or because we have other desires, we have competing considerations or greater considerations, and so it's that, or we're not thinking critically, or whatever the case is, right? So I think there's a lot of answers that somebody could give. Not their assertions, of course, I don't think they could be demonstrated in any substantial or meaningful way, but I think certainly they could respond with some sort of assertion that's not incoherent, but probably wouldn't be easily substantiated.
Yeah.
And this is the question. I mean, these are the kind of things where it takes you a couple of seconds to completely flatten the entire concept of Islam. It takes you a couple of seconds. I mean, these kind of questions no Muslim can answer. Nobody can actually go and address them. The same question, I don't know if you're aware of this, there's this thing in Islam where you need prophets and messengers. And the messengers are the people who have received the message of God, and the prophets have also received the message of God, but they're also living according to the commandments of God. So this is the difference between the Rasul and the Nabi, the messengers and the prophets. But now, the thing is, I'm asking, and again, this is a question with tears in my eyes, why is it that a God would create human beings, 7 or 8, I don't know how many billion, but only a few messengers and prophets who actually got the message? Why is it not the case that every human being, because these are also normal human beings, so that we normal human beings should be able to sort of understand the message and get it and be able to remember it. So why doesn't every single human being get the message? Why do you need special human beings to tell the other human beings what the message is of Allah that he has given to these human beings.
This honestly seems like a pyramid scheme. He starts off with a few people who start recruiting more people, and then, it seems like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, it is. But it's also highly illogical if you think about it. Why not just give everybody what they want? If that is what you desire something, but you're not giving it. You are giving it to some people, but not everybody. And then you're punishing those who don't get it for forgetting about them when you created them, knowing in advance that they will. And this is crazy. So these are the kind of questions that you can use to completely flatten Islam and show that this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, one answer that I've heard, I don't think it's a particularly good one, is that he used messengers because human beings are more receptive to that. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think human beings would be more receptive to some sort of supernatural miracle or something like that.
Divine
that would give us the wow factor,
exactly,
such that most, if not all, human beings who are rational would be convinced that's presumably within the power. But instead, we get these sort of minimal number of prophets, really. Even if you went with 124,000, that certainly hasn't reached everybody. And if they had, what would we expect? We'd expect a similar message around the world, that there's only one God and that Mecca is the place to pray towards, and certain other specific details that are unique to Islam. And we find exactly the opposite. The world as we see it is exactly what we would expect if Islam was just another competing idea with the thousands of other ones that have been dreamt out by human beings around the planet. What we would expect, I would have expected, given what the Quran and Islam is supposed to teach, and especially with those many prophets, is that this message would be ubiquitous throughout the world in very, very similar manners, that it would be hard to say that it wasn't the same sort of message being sent in sort of at least fairly detailed level.
And what backs that up is the case that now today we know that the level of active and fully believing Muslims within Islam is actually a lot lower than is always propagated. So we're talking maybe 10% of the world population that is actually Muslim. And the funny thing is that they always say, yeah, but most of the world is, or are believers in one God or the other, and therefore the believers with the God must be right. No, if you actually come to think of it, 90% of the world population totally is not interested in Islam. So that should then tell you that because 90% is not interested in Islam, there's something wrong with Islam. But they don't go that way. They sort of stop halfway down the road. So quite funny. Anyway, the other item of news that I found is something from today, actually, where Russia, China, the US, and Pakistan say no to Taliban's Islamic Emirate, because in Kabul, representatives of Russia, China, United States, and Pakistan announced opposition to the restoration of the Islamic Emirate in Afghanistan and urged the Taliban not to announce their spring offensive, because this is what they are planning. They want to take a part of Afghanistan and turn it into an Islamic Emirate. And all these countries have said, no, that's not on. We're not going to have this. You're not going to split Afghanistan, and you're not going to be propagating fundamentalist Islam. That is not going to work. We're not going to stand idly by while you go. I mean, I don't know if you still remember a couple of years ago when the Taliban were taking over Afghanistan, that they were stopping all women from getting any kind of education. They were smashing all music boxes. They were smashing everything that distracted you from Islam. And they were implementing the Wahhabi-style Islam of 1400 years ago. Can you believe it? Or 1200 years ago, whatever. But that's not on the cards, not on the desk at the moment. And they just said, no, we're not interested. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's stuff like that makes me cry.
Quick question for you, Stops. Are we doing Quranic verses? If not, I've got some comments for the video that we can potentially review in terms of that section if needed.
Well,
it's puzzling.
Sorry, this one. Because what I have done is I have taken a comment from this video which I made, And the funny thing is, Mohammed Hijab, at the moment at least, is allowing comments on one of his videos. This is a huge surprise. And this is the video we'll be commenting on later. Rob, do you want to add something? Because otherwise I'm going to start with the Krazy Komments, unless you want to do something.
Well, I've got similar comments from that video, just not including your one at the moment. So we can do a few of mine, and then you can always bring your one up.
Then you do it.
Oh, that's not the right one, I don't think. No. Let me stop that. Apologies for that. That was the wrong one. Let me just share screen again. It was this one. There we go. It's better. Hopefully you can see that. So here's some of the comments. The video that we'll be doing later on is Neil deGrasse Tyson embarrasses himself again. And we'll see who gets embarrassed here. The first person, he's not just an atheist. He goes around trying to aggressively humiliate ones who do not believe in God. Either way, he will not be remembered by anyone. Now, if you know Neil deGrasse Tyson, he often gives his own view, and he's not that belligerent towards other people. He even kind of put himself at one point, I don't know whether he's changed, that he was agnostic, because he's trying to walk the tightrope of making science open and accessible, especially in America. And because there's a lot of religious people there, they treat science and scientists with some skepticism. And so he's, as a science educator, he's trying not to be too divisive. So the idea that this guy got the idea that he's going around aggressively humiliating it, again, the question is just where's the evidence for that? Is it because you believed what Hijab said, or because you have evidence of Tyson doing it himself? And I think the answer is probably pretty clear on that. And then the next one, this man is a novice at best when it comes to these things. Oh,
Rob,
I've taken over my screen there.
Yep, Rob, sorry, I was muted. Can I just show something? Because I want to make something very, very clear. This is what I commented, because I said this is what Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson says. I can't agree to the claims by atheists that I'm one of that community. I don't have the time, energy, interest, or conducting myself that way. I'm not trying to convert people. I don't care. So he's very clear. And he says, I remain unconvinced by any claims anyone has ever made about the existence or the power of a divine force operating in the universe. That is all that he says. All right, we need to be very clear on that these are the statements. These are from him. These are things that he himself said. And now take that into consideration when you see this nonsense that people are saying here.
Yeah, so obviously this guy's got it because Hijab has said so, which we'll cover later on. But again, they and this is unfortunate, and I said it to you, didn't I, Stops, that the people like Hijab are very lucky that they're appealing to a gullible and ignorant audience.
Yeah.
Who will parrot whatever they say as if they're the second coming of Muhammad himself or something like that. And all you have to do, of course, is look this up or challenge this guy or expose his, pseudo-scientific, pseudo-intellectual, fallacious approach, and it all sort of crumbles down, right? This illusion is quickly dismantled. But for people like this particular fellow, unfortunately, that, of course, doesn't enter his awareness very likely. But the second guy said, that man is a novice at best when it comes to these things. He should stay in his field and not embarrass himself. I think he was giving an opinion about something, and so he didn't claim to be an expert. But if the view is that if you're a novice, then you should stay in your field and not talk about it, well, then every single layperson should keep their mouth quiet. That includes all of us and virtually everybody else on the planet on almost every other topic. So that would be pretty ridiculous, wouldn't it? So obviously, again, we can't take that particularly seriously. But I do like this one. My cousin, who lives in a small village in Kerala, India, has been influenced. Thank you. By Neil deGrasse. He argues against Islam with his parents and other relatives. He really thinks Neil deGrasse Tyson is telling the truth. This is the effect these people who use science and education to spread atheism have on the Muslim youth. I understand why Hijab is agitated. So
Hold on, I got to comment on this for a quick sec. I have a reading disability, which is prescribed by a doctor or diagnosed by a doctor. Yet I know how to spell Neil deGrasse Tyson's name. Somehow this guy doesn't. And why is science education spreading atheism? It's almost as if religion is anti-science or anti-truth.
Well, there are quite a few prominent people who do take that view, even though somebody like Sabur is suggesting people shouldn't be saying that. But of course they do. The very people he quotes actually do say that science is likely to lead you to atheism. Now, you could disagree, but what you can't do is quote those people and then make use of those people and then say, well, you shouldn't be saying that, because that's exactly what they do say. But this
Rob,
this commenter...
Sorry.
Okay, I'll just finish this quickly. This commenter seems to think that these people, aka Neil deGrasse Tyson, who use science and education to spread atheism, they're using science and education, and it may well lead to atheism, but it's not spreading it. And as you quite rightly pointed out, he doesn't suggest that he's doing that anyway. So he is spreading science and education. So he'd reject this. But this is quite devastating in any case. So if this commenter were to make an argument that it is in fact leading to atheism, then he would be undermining the idea of Muslims, appealing to science or indeed being educated, lest they become an atheist. So that's probably not an argument that he would want to argue for. But Tyson would suggest that it's a straw man of his position anyway. But if this is the problem, and that's why hijab is agitated, well, I understand that too, because presumably hijab is not in science or education, or he would argue that it doesn't spread for atheism. Either way, this commenter is mistaken. Whichever way he goes, he'd be mistaken.
But it shows you the level. But if we're talking about things, I mean, Hijab thinks so highly of himself. I mean, he's a narcissist, okay? So he is the one who says, well, I'm studying, I'm postgraduate, I'm this, I'm that, I'm going for a doctorate, I don't know what he's doing, the same as Subur. They think so much of themselves. And now look how he actually spells the title, because it says Neil deGrasse Tyson and then embarrasses. He doesn't even know how to spell embarrass. And yet he's fixed it. He realized it. Because if you look at this one, look how he spelled it initially.
I think that's the same as my one.
No, look at embarrass. There's only one R. Now look at yours.
Yeah, it's only got one R. Yours
it has. I saw two. Oh, no, sorry.
No.
I thought he fixed it and put two R's in there. No, he hasn't. So it's still, sorry, this is my mistake. I saw the two S's now.
It's still the same. Yeah.
But he is the one who thinks so highly of himself. He is such an academic and intellectual, and he doesn't even know how to spell embarrass.
Yeah. And there we go again. He should stay in his lane and stop talking about Islam, God, and religion. He's ignorant about it. I did watch the video. I don't remember. Stops, you can remind me, but I don't think he talked about Islam.
No.
I could be wrong though. I think he just talked about his belief as to why he's not not some sort of theological or a theistic believer. So I think this guy's straw manning his position as well. When public intellectuals misrepresent almost all concepts of God, they only prove to embarrass. At least this person got it right, embarrass themselves and manage to represent the intellectual integrity of their audience. Well, we'll see where he's misrepresenting the concept of God. He was asked an opinion, and so if he's misrepresenting it, then to me that normally means that somebody knows that what they're saying is not correct. And now it could be that he's simply mistaken, but then you'd say he's mistaken. Whoever is seeing this, just remember to smile. It's great. Although he can't elaborate or articulate it in this way because he's philosophically incompetent. Savage. These sort of assertions obviously appeal to these sort of less critically thinking audience, right? They like the idea of rhetoric. And as you'll see later on, Hijab is very good at rhetoric. That's what I will give him. He will say a lot, very little of it will be substance, and almost nothing will be substantiated, but he'll throw out some claims and throw out some rhetoric, and to the gullible and the less evolved minds, this is music to their ears. And that's why he's got, I've said he's very lucky to have this audience. If he had an audience like us and many of our viewers here, nobody would take him seriously, wouldn't get any views on the video. But because these fellows here don't do too much thinking, certainly not critical thinking, and they're like anybody speaking their own language, this is, just food for them, right? They can pat themselves on the back and see how wonderful their pseudo-intellectual people are on YouTube.
And by the way, you see there that there are replies. I think I replied to each and every one of them because I was able to. So
okay.
I had so much fun going in there, and you will see that almost every single one of them, I'm leaving a comment. So there you are. This is me, okay? So, your doesn't on what you claim and so on. So this is so much fun for me, and I'm being taken to task here because I'm suddenly getting 20 replies from these people, and I'm having so much fun going back at them.
How dare you talk against the great prophet Hijab?
Yeah.
Yeah, here's another one with you potentially. You might have said something here as well. I'm not sure.
I think it was like on nearly every single one of them. I just picked them. What I normally do is I sort this by time, so that I get the later ones, and then I comment on each one of the later ones, because it's fun. So
I mean, there's so many of these, right?
Yeah.
There is evil everywhere.
And I've got some more. This is the point, because nearly every one of them is a crazy comment.
Yeah. You keep talking, we keep refuting. Mohammed the lion hijab. It's comical, isn't it? It's like I do feel sorry for some of these. Go on.
They can't even get the quotes right. Why is one of the quotes like on the bottom?
In some languages you have that. It depends on what your language settings are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of very sad. Brother, we're all looking forward to seeing you and Neil discussing these issues and finally getting him cornered publicly, because of course cornering somebody is the route to intellectual honesty, isn't it? That's definitely the way to go.
I also got to ask, didn't Neil deGrasse Tyson study with Carl Sagan? I can't see who's going to corner.
Yeah, he's a cosmologist.
He was his mentor.
He's not a philosopher. Brother Hijab is like Khabib of the intellectual octagon. You just demolished his whole career in 7 minutes and 49 seconds. Voila, brother.
I thought his facial hits were
You wonder if these are paid for. I do wonder, though, whether human beings, these sort of people, have any level of ability to think about things in any critical or nuanced way. And seemingly the answer is no, which is, it is quite sad that you have such a gullible and ignorant audience that wouldn't know the difference between a good argument and a bad one. And I would love, what I might even pay for is somebody like Hijab to not tell them and play devil's advocate and actually put forward an atheist argument or something like that and tell them why it's so wonderful and see whether any of them disagree. Or they might go, brother, that was brilliant. And then afterwards you find out that actually was an argument against Islam. That would be fascinating to see how many of them are actually paying attention.
It's true. A lot of them will just a lot of these comments are just Barnum statements. They're just, you're so wonderful, I love you, you're great, and good job, and, just useless.
Yeah, I did hear, actually, we should, you know what we should do, Stops? I actually saw it here. I happened to be on Discord a while back, and this one guy was a polytheist, and he put an argument for polytheism forward that actually, a priori, given a few assumptions that a Muslim might accept, is not a bad argument in favor of polytheism being more likely, if you take theism to be the case, for polytheism to be more likely than monotheism. So, if there's any Muslim out there who wants to come on, we could always do something like that.
Wish we could. All right. Sorry. Okay, so let's start with the first one that I found there. I'm a Muslim, alhamdulillah, but I'm a bit of confused. As Brother Hijab said, Dawkins and Harris do not believe that evil exists. But why then are they regularly criticizing Islam and saying it's evil? In fact, why have they said that religion is an evil in the society? Isn't that wonderful? I don't know if anybody has heard that Dawkins and Harris do not believe that evil exists. I don't know where these people get this from. It's so silly. I don't know what these guys are doing. This guy says, if this is what he knows, this is to Neil deGrasse Tyson, if this is what he knows in this field, then it's worrying on what he knows in his own field.
That's so incredibly silly, isn't it? One could be very ignorant in a particular field, but be an expert at another. The fact that somebody's ignorant in a particular field doesn't mean that they're ignorant in everything, especially if they have some credentials in another field. They might not have full critical thinking, that's true, but to say that it's worrying what he knows in his own field, how did you establish that? Why would it be worrying that? Why do you think it's quote unquote worrying that what he knows in his own field? Because he made, by your lights, a simplistic or mistaken argument about a field that he's not an expert in. How does that follow?
Yeah, this is
it's
quite funny. Yeah, but Hijab he claims he's making philosophical arguments, but he's not. He doesn't understand philosophy. And this is the same thing that people said about Dawkins. Dawkins said when he wrote his book, which one is The God Delusion or something, this was a fun book. It was not intended to be serious at all. And then people are taking him to task that he is not philosophically 100% sure or something. He is not a philosopher, for crying out loud.
I know one person who is not involved in these conversations or anything like that, who said to me he read it on a plane home from the United States and became an atheist on the plane. Wow. So whether it's got perfectly sound arguments or not, it's certainly at least been persuasive to one, if not many other people. And Harrison, Dawkins, and others get hundreds of emails either every day or every week by their lights of people saying, I've read your book and it's helped me so much and so forth. So they're making a big difference in their own way. Whether their books are, philosophically watertight or not, they are at least convincing for some people.
And if Hijab has a field, surely a cow lives on it. Oh, goodness, this is so funny. Okay, here we get 2 for the price of 1. That is the problem of any atheist or agnostic worldview. Remember, the title of this thing is that he embarrasses himself. So this is the problem of any atheist, agnostic worldview. Now, give me one example. Just give me one example of where this is the case. I love the answer, bro. I don't know what these guys are thinking, because Hijab is making a complete, utter fool of himself, and they are saying, yeah, this is wonderful. This is exactly what Rob was pointing out. Now, Neil's right. There is nothing benevolent in the universe. But God is not in the universe. He is completely beyond the universe. Atheists just cannot imagine anything beyond all that we know.
That's so silly. Obviously, we can take a view that it isn't, depending on the sort of God claims, it isn't incoherent for a God to exist. So we can, I think, a lot better, in our experience, conceptualize things than at least most Muslims we've spoken to. But what this particular comment seems to be misunderstanding is that we're talking about the attribute of God. And obviously, if God is involved in this world, then what we have is either evidence for or against his benevolence in this world. So the fact that he exists outside of this universal world, that's neither here nor there. That's kind of a red herring, because deGrasse Tyson is talking about the evil in this world. And so it's that, the problem of evil suggests that if there is an omnibenevolent or maximally benevolent sort of God, i.e. all good God, that God could exist outside or inside or both at the same time, potentially, this universe. And we're looking at what do we see in the world, and does this marry up with the claims this God does? And all we have to do is ask that question. And I think there's a very powerful argument against it. I think the evidential argument from evil, and in particular the unnecessary suffering of animals, is very strong, because none of the theodicies work with that. A theodicy, by the way, is just like an argument that theologians have come up with to try and explain why there's evil. Oh, it's evil because X, Y, and Z. Ultimately, that there's a greater purpose to this, and they then try to explain it. What they can't do is say it's the mystery of God. Once they've done that, they've thrown the towel in, and then their defense of the argument absolutely crumbles. So if you ever have the argument from evil and you're presenting that or talking about it, and the person eventually says, well, only God knows, or it's the mystery of God or something like that, then they've thrown the towel in, and you can immediately stop at that point, because they're precisely saying that no, they think he is benevolent, i.e. that he's all good, and they would have reasons. And if you say he's all good, but I'm throwing in the towel and it's a mystery to me, well, then you're undermining your own argument.
And one thing I want to point out, just to make this 100% clear, Dr. Tyson is not talking about evil. Dr. Tyson is only talking about the claim that there is a benevolent creator God who created with huge competence this universe. That is the only thing that he is addressing by saying, well, if I look at reality, if I look at the claims, I don't see that reflected in reality. I see that 99.999% of the universe is trying to kill us. So there's no competence and no benevolence there regarding the attitude of the universe towards human beings. And that is his only point. He's not talking about the argument from evil. He's not addressing anything like that. He's talking about something completely different. And this is what people don't seem to understand. This guy's, these two, about time to take the intellectual ground back.
Well, that would presuppose that you've lost it, and now you're supposed to be trying to get it back.
Using
they
hijab.
lost it 1400 years ago.
And then a guy says, can you please add English subtitles because some words are a little bit difficult.
Is it that he doesn't understand the words, or is it that
Yes.
he can't comprehend them because of hijab's accent? So I don't think subtitles are going to help you there. Unless it's the case that you don't understand it because of the accent. But if you don't understand what the words mean, then simply writing them in text is not going to help you better understand them.
And finally, the last one, tell him, champ. Now, this is a typical show by Hijab, okay, where he runs and raves and shouts and gestures, and it's totally crazy. And this guy, tell him, champ, he or she or whatever, still enjoys this. And this for me is mind-boggling. It's crazy. Okay, guys, that's it.
So we're going to do one of two things. Obviously, we've now sort of bigged it up and go straight to the video, and then if we have time, do some Quran verses, or you could do it the other way around, whatever works for you.
Well, I didn't do any Quran verses because I thought we're going to go do the slavery discussion today with Smartcat. But Smartcat feels he's not quite ready yet. This is why we did not. We're not doing the slavery thing today, and this is why, at the spur of a moment, we just sort of switch it. That's why, if anybody has any suggestion, that any topic that they want to talk about, we can do that. So what I would suggest we do, we go through the video. It's a very short video. There's not much substance there anyway. And then if anybody does want to talk about something, want to raise something, if you, Nick, no, but you want to do slavery. No, if somebody wants to do something that is not related to slavery, let's talk about that and see what happens.
All right,
Yeah.
I can come back to that, yeah. All right, we're
Rob,
good to
do you
share.
want to run?
Yeah,
Do you
we
want
go.
to run the video?
Yeah, I'll do it, yeah. Oh, you know what I haven't done? Let me stop that. That was naughty of me. I didn't click on the audio button, which I need to do separately. So
Share. You can just share the video.
find it. Yeah, but I've got to share it with a tab and not. I was sharing desktop there, so
Okay.
that wouldn't work. Okay, here we go. So again, title of this video is Neil deGrasse Tyson Embarrasses Himself Again. You can see where my comment came from. 414,000 subscribers. How sad is
Wow.
that even if you were influencing half of that, you're going to have a lot of sort of ignorant and gullible audience members being misled there. But never mind, we're here, so we're going to break this down now and see.
But he's not sitting in his car.
No, he's obviously sitting somewhere. I don't know if this is at, Sapiens Institute or somewhere else or wherever it is. All right, here we go. And you guys just shout stop when you want me to. I'll be probably stopping a fair amount anyway, but here we go.
Today I'm going to be doing a quick fire refutation on this individual called Neil deGrasse Tyson. Let's look at what he says is the reason why he doesn't believe in God when he was asked that question, and come back and refute him.
Do you believe in God?
Okay, hang on. Rob, before we do that, sorry, I need to point out that he is being incredibly disrespectful here. Now, Neil deGrasse Tyson has a PhD. He is a director. He's a president. He is a huge lot of things. He has won awards. He has won like all sorts of distinguishments. And this guy, deGrasse Tyson or something, who the fuck does he think he is? He is just somebody who runs his mouth in Speaker's Corner in a park in London. What does he have to his name? Absolutely nothing. And he talks about this guy who, I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't like about Neil deGrasse Tyson. Okay, cool. But there is one thing. He is incredibly competent, incredibly knowledgeable, and he is very good at communicating things in a very light-hearted way. And now this guy, Hijab, comes in and says, well, this guy, I'm going to refute him. I mean, oh, thank you. That's actually a very good idea. Yeah, this gives you an idea of who we're talking about.
He's been a director of the Hayden Planetarium, center of the American Natural Museum, where he founded the Department of Astrophysics in 1997. He studied at Harvard, the University of Texas, and Columbia University as a postdoctoral research associate at Princeton University. He joined the Hayden Planetarium as a staff scientist, visiting research scientist and lecturer. In 1996, he became director and oversaw a £210 million reconstruction. From 1995 to 2005, he wrote monthly essays in the Universe column for Natural History magazine, and some of those were published. Books include Death by the Black Hole, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, etc. He's also received the Stephen Hawking Medal for Science Communication in 2017. He served on the Government Commission on the Future of U.S. Aerospace Industry, and on 2004 Mars and Beyond Commission. He was awarded the NASA Distinguished Public Service Medal in the same year. From 2006 to 2011, he hosted the television show Nova Science on PBS, and he's hosted the weekly podcast Star Talk, a spin-off of Star Talk, began airing in National Geographic. He's also done Cosmos, a series, Space-Time Odyssey, and a successor to Carl Sagan's 1980 series Cosmos, A Personal Voyage. The U.S. National Academy of Sciences awarded Tyson the Public Welfare Medal in 2015 for his extraordinary role in exciting the public about the wonders of science. So he is clearly a science educator. He's a popularizer of science. And for us, at least, somebody who's doing an amazing job there. I mean, those credits kind of speak for themselves. And as you've quite rightly pointed out, stops. We have Hijab, who has written a short essay on something and a short book on the Kalam cosmological argument, which he still can't argue for in any particularly good way.
And I ripped apart easily.
So
this
with all of that said,
I wanted to bring that up because this nincompoop thinks of himself as somebody who can refute somebody like this. I mean, of course you can. I mean, there are things I have refuted Neil deGrasse Tyson on his claim that there were so many scientific advancements made during the Islamic Golden Age in the 10, 11, 12th century. He is misinformed. So he has not looked into this, and he is repeating what he has heard from others. He did not research this. And I have written to him, and I pointed it out, and he said, oh shit, I didn't know that. I will have to look into that before I say anything like that again. So this is the kind of, reaction that I expect from a person like that, because he doesn't see himself as the god of astrophysics. He sees himself as a human being who has been lucky in being able to study something and gain knowledge in an area that not many people have knowledge in. But he accepts that he makes mistakes, and he accepts that he doesn't know everything. And he says he says, look, I am not here to convert people. I'm not here to do a lot of things. I'm just here to show people how wonderful it can be. And this is the spiritual side of me, where I go and I find a connection that sometimes is beyond words when I look up at the universe, and this kind of this emotional attachment is there. That is what I want to point out. So this is the kind of person that we're talking about. This is the kind of person that Hijab is trying to take on. So, yeah.
Yeah, so the more I look at the universe, just the less convinced I am that there is something benevolent going on. You look at this list of ways that life is made miserable on earth by natural causes. And I just ask, how do you deal with that?
Tyson, as you can.
Okay,
All right,
just stop. Can you just repeat what he said in the beginning? Because there are a lot of people who are misquoting him, who are saying he says there is nothing benevolent in this God. He does not mention God. He says there is nothing benevolent going on. This is not God, it's going on.
There is something benevolent going on. You look at this list of ways that life is made miserable on earth by natural causes.
There you go.
And I just ask, how do you deal with that?
Tyson.
Okay, so it's clear that his objection is look at the misery that's caused here on earth by all of these things going on here, and if there were a benevolent God, then clearly, one of the ways is either God doesn't want to get involved, or he can't, in whatever way stop this from happening. That's typically how it's phrased. He didn't phrase that himself, but he's wondering how this could be the case. Right, so that's his objection.
And one small thing that I want to bring up is that Mohammed Hijab doesn't even have the common courtesy of calling him Dr. Tyson or Bill deGrasse Tyson, or at least Neil. Straight up goes.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, he can be disrespectful. If he's got a good point, then we will deal with the point. I mean, I think we all know that it's rhetoric, and he wants to come across as appealing to his gullible audience. So, I mean, we can certainly point that out. I'm not as concerned about that, because if they have a doctor of theology, I'm not particularly concerned that he's a doctor of theology. I think obviously there's a big difference between being a doctor in theology and being a doctor in science. As we saw there, the list of his accomplishments is pretty extensive. And so, but I think what's important is, does he have good reasons for saying what he says? And as Stops pointed out, not always. In his field, he's obviously an expert, but he's giving his opinion here. So let's see how Hijab, quote unquote, quickly refutes this idea. We've got to keep in mind what the idea is, because as Stops said, and other people will say, and the comments were certainly saying, there'll be a misrepresentation. So his view is, seeing all the suffering and so forth that's going on here, how, this is problematic for him in the universe. And it's true, right? You can imagine virtually everything about us that could have been better, that we would suffer less. And there is, I think, a reasonably strong argument for an antinatalist position, not to bring new sentient life into existence because of the suffering that's involved. And if you never came into existence, you wouldn't have the experience of pleasure, and you certainly wouldn't have the experience of suffering. But not having the experience of suffering is good, and not having the experience of pleasure is not bad. And so that's called the asymmetry argument by David Benetton. I think that's a reasonably strong argument, but we just have to look around in every way, either humans or indeed animals, which is a much stronger argument. We could see how it could be constructed such that there was less suffering, either through natural causes or between each other. And of course, the Muslim response, or one of the responses, everything's a test. But A, that seems unfalsifiable. And B, then we've got to ask, the more you suffer, is the test better for you? In which case, everybody should be suffering at least maximally, if not maximally, then a great deal more. So in order to pass the test, because if you get an easy pass, then likely, you may not get into heaven. If you've got to have a lot of struggles, then presumably, if the test is harder, so is the reward greater. And so that's also a problem that I would levy to Muslims as well. But we'll see how he responds now to Tyson.
Tyson, as you can see here, guys, he's saying that the reason why he doesn't believe in God is because of all these disasters that exist in the world.
No, it's not just that the disasters exist. It's that God allows this to happen. And this happens to people, both believers and unbelievers, who are supposedly good people. Talk about the what do you call it? The Boxing Day tsunami wiped out over 200,000 people, most of them likely to be believers, both Islamic, Christian, and others. And these were people that believed in God and so forth. Now, was that a good thing? If you think it is a good thing, then presumably you would wish for more natural disasters to wipe out the entire planet if you think it's a good thing. If you think it's a bad thing, then the question is, why would God allow that? And that's kind of what Tyson is asking.
Now, this is the problem of evil, which is well known from the Hellenistic time. And the way he actually framed it is almost exactly the same way, although he couldn't elaborate it or articulate it in this way because he is philosophically incompetent.
No, he wasn't asked to do it. He wasn't asked to do it, and he gave his opinions. She asked why it is. It's a short show. He possibly could look that up. It's not difficult to go and look that up, but he either didn't have the time or the inclination, and he's not there to go into deep theological issues. He is a science educator, not
But
a
the thing is,
theologian.
but this was not his point. This has nothing to do with his point. Because what Dr. Tyson was saying quite clearly is, look, there's a claim out there that there is a capable and competent and benevolent creator. But if I look at the reality, this doesn't match. This is not reflected in what we see in reality. That is all that he is saying. He's not talking about like God creating evil. He's just saying if we look at the ways that nature gives us a hardship on our planet, that's it. There is nothing benevolent going on. He does not mention God. He says, look, it's nature that is doing that. So I don't understand. What Hijab is doing is he's just building up a strawman, and that's it.
Yeah, I think she did ask him why don't you think there's a God, or why do you think God does not exist? And for him, the problem of evil was one of those. So it relates to the problem, but the world we see is exactly what we would expect if there were no God. In other words, if this was a naturalistic universe without any sort of creator, right? This idea that, there is suffering in the world, there's some good, it's sort of almost random in a sense. We would expect that, or we wouldn't expect that, or we'd need very good reasons to expect this under a benevolent God type of hypothesis. So it seems to be evidence against that and evidence for a naturalistic view of the world, which is what I would expect to see. What would falsify atheism or non-believers if you had a heavenly experience here. Right, if everything was perfect and you lived and then nothing bad happened, then I would be going, that is the sort of world that I would expect from a benevolent God, not the sort of world that we see now. So I would be more inclined to think atheism is false if we had a world like that, a much better world than what we do have. Then I'd be inclined to think there is a benevolent, creator.
That Epicurus did. Epicurus, basically an ancient philosopher of the Hellenistic time period, ancient Greek philosopher, who said that, well, if God is all powerful, yes, and all good, the fact that evil exists means that if he's all powerful and he's allowing evil to exist, that is a contradiction to his omnipotence or his all power.
Oh, goodness.
But if
he totally bought.
Oh, let's bring you up there, Stops, because you've got that right there. There you go.
This is
He's
what
God
you
willing
really
to
said.
prevent evil. Yeah.
And
So here's Epicurus, right? Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he's not impotent. Omnipotent.
omnipotent.
Omnipotent, yes.
That was a-
Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent.
Sigmund Freud.
Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God, right? So that's the correct understanding. So Hijab's obviously got his interpretation of that.
Well, it's totally wrong. He's totally botching it.
Yeah.
is all powerful and he allows it to exist, this contradicts his goodness or the fact that he's all good. The fallacy here is that we don't believe as Muslims, and I'm pretty sure most theists don't believe, in a God with two attributes, goodness and power. We
Okay. So, let him just finish the sentence.
believe in a God with many different attributes.
Okay. But the two that are important in this discussion is his power and his benevolence. Whatever other attributes he has is irrelevant in this case, unless you want to make an argument that some other attribute contributes to these attributes in some way that can affect them. This is what you talk about. So theists will talk about, if he's all powerful and he's all omnibenevolent, then he has the ability, and if he doesn't, then why not, type of thing. So those are the two important attributes. Why would we care about the other ones? Unless you suggest, or you're going to make an argument, which I'd love you to make, that, hey, we should also take into account other attributes because they affect it, and here's how they affect it. Therefore, these two attributes are not the only things to take into account. If you made an argument like that and could substantiate it, and I've just done that off my head, then you'd be onto something. Otherwise, talking about other attributes is a complete red herring, and it is irrelevant. So what's the argument that other attributes are necessary in this particular case?
And on top of that, if he says there are many other attributes, should we now go and address each and every attribute? The problem with this all, however, is that nobody really knows what these attributes are. Because if you go and you say, well, these are the 99 names of Allah, they're not names, but they're actually attributes. But if you go and look in the list, they're all different. I have not found a list that corresponds exactly in all 99 points with the others. There's always differences. So I've gone and copied them and then sorted them alphabetically in order to not make any mistakes. They're always different. So, the first 10 or 15 or something, they sort of correspond, but then they all differ. So if you give me one list that every single Muslim would agree to, I will take each one of those 99 apart.
With love, with mercy, with justice, with wisdom.
And all of those fall under omnibenevolence. But thank you for breaking down sub-attributes. How is this relevant?
So that's the first thing. This reductionist understanding of a God with two attributes is problematic.
He never said that. You've interpreted that. He just made a statement about what he sees in the world. You've taken those two attributes and attributed to him. Thank you for straw manning him. Does it feel good to try and knock down your own straw man? The only problem is you couldn't even knock down your own straw man because the other attributes that you mentioned are part of omnibenevolence anyway. So that's a double fail at this stage.
Exactly. That's how incompetent this guy is.
Number one. Number two is, even on those grounds, atheistic philosophers like J.K. Mackie and others have said this problem of evil inquiry or postulation or argument is in fact, let me read exactly what we can concede, he says.
Rob, can you just pause here? Please note, he is the one bringing up this. There is no such thing as an atheist philosopher. He is bringing up this Mackie guy. It's not Neil deGrasse Tyson. It is Hijab who brings up Mackie, and yet he's doing the same thing again. Why does he bring up Mackie when Mackie is wrong? It doesn't work.
The problem of evil does not show that the central doctrines of theism are inconsistent. The reason why he says that is because it's very clear to conceive of a God who is all powerful, but which allows a kind of evil to exist. There's no...
Okay, but then you've got to make the argument, which are the theodicies that theologians, mostly Christian theologians, have come up with to argue why it's not really, if it is evil, there's a greater purpose, and therefore the greater purpose is good, and that outweighs the evil. So you've got to come up with theodicies. So yes, you could say that there's these evil, but what you've got to show is that there's a greater good that comes at the end of this in order to suggest that this evil is only... it's kind of offset by the good, and in that case you might have some sort of argument, but then you've got to show that in every case. And all I need to bring to you is the unnecessary suffering of animals, and good luck at that point. And I've listened to some smart people on this. Your arguments for the theodicies as to why evil exists just doesn't work against animals. But anyway,
no logical inconsistency in conceiving of a world where both God exists and suffering exists. The question is why? And we believe in a wise God, and wisdom from our perspective as Muslims is appropriacy. You want to put it?
Okay, so appropriacy is an unfalsifiable claim. So whatever evil's out there, it must be appropriate, and it's God's. It's like the mystery of God. Let's see if he actually gives an argument, because if it's appropriate, there must be some falsification criteria, and presumably given us an argument for why we should take that seriously. Otherwise, this is just claim that says, hey, whatever goes on, it must be appropriate by God's light. I don't know how or why. I'm taking the unfalsifiable, unsubstantiated view that there's some level of appropriacy here, so I can go to sleep at night. Well, you can if you're intellectually dishonest or lazy, but if you want to put forward an argument, then you can do that now, and we can look at that.
I was waiting for this word, for this expression, for this term, because this is the huge problem that I see with all these apologists. They are simply incapable of formulating a cogent argument. This is the point. The argument is the crux of the whole thing. The argument has to consist of presenting what the problem is, why it is a problem, and then demonstrating how you are able to solve the problem. But they don't know how to do that. They can't structure this. And this is the huge, big problem with trying to find any kind of retort to what they are claiming, because they're just throwing out sound bites, but not a complete argument.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. This is one of the tactics of these apologists. He's not the only one. His teammates do this as well. They'll misquote or cherry pick or quote mine one or two sentences from the book they probably haven't read that the Christians have appealed to, something like that. But they won't either understand it or make the full argument, and then indeed give subsequent reasons for why we ought to take the argument seriously. The fact that Mackie said something, which again, as Thinking Clearly and others in the chat have said, we'd have to check whether he in fact has accurately represented that. He's got a history of misrepresenting or quote mining these particular people. But if they said that, why ought anybody take that seriously? Because somebody said so? That's just an appeal to authority. It needs to be some reason that if we had that expertise or it could be explained to us, we would likely believe it too. And it's, as you point out, they never give these sort of arguments. He makes these rhetorical, baseless assertions and then cherry picks somebody that people might know or might agree with him as if that's somehow an argument. I'm going, why would I accept that? I don't care if it was Jesus Christ or Muhammad himself who made the claims that Mackie does. I want to know why I should believe it. And if you can't give the reasons, I know your gullible audience don't care and wouldn't understand it anyway because they're just so hypnotized, but the rest of us are looking for some argument. Otherwise, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Put it in one word: appropriacy. God knows what is appropriate for the human being, what is appropriate for the human project. Now, you might not be convinced.
No, nobody should be convinced. You shouldn't be convinced. Your Muslims shouldn't be convinced. This is where the critical thinking of Muslims, to whatever degree they all do this, is lacking. None of you should be convinced. You should go, hang on a moment, what is appropriacy? What's the benchmark? What's the hallmark of this? How do I establish whether something's appropriate? And if only God can do that, well, then there's no way to disprove this. Then it's an unfalsifiable claim. And unfalsifiable claims shouldn't be informative or interesting to anybody, especially you guys, if you are thinking critically. But again, that's obviously a problem.
The other thing I'd like to point out at this moment is, look at his face. The thing is that now he starts going into just shouting. And the funny thing is, I'm not sure that this is actually an act. I'm not sure that he doesn't have a psychological or mental issue somewhere, because he really goes off the rails. Now, I don't know whether this is an act. I don't know whether this is intentional, whether he's trying to create an impression or something, if he's just trying to be controversial, if he's trying to energize people, if he's trying to polarize. I do not know. But it's troubling to me to see how he can drive himself into a rage just by talking about things where in the end he totally loses control.
And I think, in my personal opinion, I just think that this guy is somewhat weak because he's essentially a keyboard warrior. He just hides behind the camera. If Neil deGrasse Tyson was there, I don't think he would be as confident as he is right now. Only reason why he's getting mad or something is because he's essentially behind the video.
I'm not sure about that, Nick. I think because he doesn't have a lot of introspection and self-reflection, he probably would be just as cocky with Neil deGrasse Tyson if he were live here. You saw it with David Wood and with other people like Cosmic Skeptic and others. He thinks if he shouts a lot and he has some sort of domineering rhetoric, that's somehow impressive or informative. And I think Stops is right. But I'm not sure whether he knows this and he's appealing to his gullible audience, or as you say, he just thinks that this is the way to conduct himself. Either way, I think it's not impressive or informative or interesting for anybody else, and I'm waiting for the substance. But then again, maybe I'm in the small minority, including you guys and our viewers. I can see that the Muslims aren't, most of them aren't troubled by this at all, but I'm waiting for a substantive argument, not a bunch of assertions that can be made without evidence that I have to dismiss without evidence, but I'm looking for something substantial here. And you're right, raising of the voice, somehow this appeals to his gullible audience as if he's the champ and look how he did something, all because he raised his voice, not because anything he said is actually substantial. That tells you a lot about the people who are paying attention, or in this case, probably not paying close attention.
But maybe he is hiding something by this act. Maybe he is sort of, brushing over something, his own inadequacies, his own insecurities, by going and making this brush of impression of himself, which maybe he is not. Maybe this is why he constantly goes towards this MMA stance and this violence. I don't know where.
Yeah, I mean,
this
we can
comes from
speculate
and why
about
this
it, I
is.
guess. It's,
Yeah, but
yeah,
look
like-
at just watch the body language.
But as an astrophysicist, let me ask you a question, Tyson, because I know you're watching these videos on the sly. I know you're
Do
saying,
you? What's your evidence for that? All we have to do, what's your evidence for that?
He's peeking
What's
at
your
deGrasse
evidence for that?
Tyson through the window.
It's as spurious a claim as everything else we've heard in just 2.5 minutes. Look how long it's taken us to get through only 3 minutes of this video, because there's so many assertions that are baseless here. And this is another one, right? Just appealing to the audience, as if Tyson is going to listen to some internet nobody who's a pseudo-intellectual who can't put forward a cogent argument with any sort of premises that he can actually argue for. Why would anybody take him serious? And the only reason we are looking at this is to expose this. If there's Muslims who are listening who thought that perhaps he's got something informative or interesting to say, they might watch this and go, wow, I never noticed that. And that would be an intellectually honest Muslim who's looking at this and go, I can still believe in Islam, but I don't have to take this character seriously. And in fact, there are at least a few Muslims, unfortunately very few, that don't take him particularly seriously. That's the sort of Muslims that we're trying to appeal to, because most of our audience will see straight through this anyway.
sitting there, your heart is racing, you're watching these videos. Yeah? And you're thinking, oh, yes, I screwed up again. I shouldn't have spoken about this.
You mustn't be careful not to project your own insecurities, right? Maybe you need a mirror up there. Maybe the video is you're thinking of yourself here, but you mislabeled it. So it wasn't Tyson. Maybe he said hijab, and then he mislabeled it in his brain here. Perception is projection, meaning whatever you perceive of somebody else is very likely what is going on for you in this case. And it's obviously the irony there is quite thick, isn't it?
I know that. So let me ask you a question. As an astrophysicist, as a scientist, how can you even prove that evil exists in the first place?
Okay, no problem. Well, I'm not an astrophysicist. So first question is, what do you accept as proof? Do you want an argument? Do you want some mathematical proof? Do you want some empirical proof? What is it you mean by the word proof? So now you'd have to establish what that means. And then depending on what you say about it, either I will say, yes, I can meet that standard, or no, I can't. But then I will say, hang on a moment, Mr. Hijab, because I know you're watching these videos on the sly. You should be asking yourself, holy crap, Robin, Stops, and Nick have actually exposed my fallacious thinking. I'm going to stop doing these videos. Or probably not, even if you went through this with a fine-tooth comb, because I doubt you could refute anything that we've said here. But if I had to ask you to hold yourself to the same standard, could you do so? So be very careful what you define as proof, because whatever you define, I'm going to hold you to the same standard. And it might be that you define proof as a very high standard that I couldn't meet, and I'll openly say so, and then I'll ask you the same question and see whether you can meet your own standard.
But he doesn't care. For him, it's just impact.
So could I put forward an argument? Yes, I could. Depends what proof is for you.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of that. This kind of reminds me of that evidence that Kent Hovind had a few years ago, where he said that if he would pay anyone $250,000 if they proved to him evolution existed. But then when they checked out the details, he was the one that decided what the evidence was, and then it had to come out the Bible, and there was a whole other list of things where it had to be Christian Science and all that. So I think when Hijab says that, he's thinking of the same way. It has to come out of the Bible, out of his own, or out of the Quran, out of his own view, and it has to match everything he says. And you have to agree with him in order for it to be counted as evidence, even if it's contradictory.
Prove that evil exists in the first instance on a scientific level. Can you put evil under a microscope? Is there a way to empirically test this thing called evil? Do you believe in a realist understanding of morality in the first place?
Well, there's the philosophers' papers, the full surveys. Most philosophers are moral realists. I don't happen to be one myself. But Sam Harris is a moral realist, for example. He's going to quote Harris now and misquote him. And I've read The Moral Landscape multiple times. And in fact, I was a proponent of that view. And thanks to TDS Dave and others, I noticed that the initial premise wasn't one that one could argue as a fact of the matter. It had to be a hypothetical imperative. It wasn't a categorical imperative. The hypothetical imperative is, hey, something is right in light of a particular goal. But whatever you select as a goal, it's very unlikely that you can argue that goal is objectively true, in the sense that it's true that the Earth goes around the sun. So whatever that goal is, it would need to be some selection criteria. The categorical hypothetical is something that says it is true, it's a fact of the matter. And the one that I think Kant gives is you should keep your promises. But even that, I'm not necessarily convinced is a categorical imperative, because you'd ask the question, well, in respect of why would one want to keep one's promises, in respect of what goal? Because it could be that you break a promise, and that is in fact a good thing to do under certain circumstances, depending on what the goal is. So I'm not, again, I haven't read deeply into it, but I'm not at this stage convinced there is a categorical imperative anyway. But whether Tyson is a moral realist or a moral anti-realist, somebody who doesn't think that there are moral facts of the matter, but that we make it up, or it comes from humans, it's contingent on humans, he still expressed his view. He could do that as a realist or an anti-realist. He could provide an argument, which he didn't have time to do and may not know necessarily at the top of his head either way. So what?
In opposed to an anti-realist or a skeptical morality? And if you believe
what the hell is a skeptical morality? You got a realist and you got an anti-realist. What the hell is a skeptical morality? Please, somebody tell me. I'd like to know. Maybe there is such a thing. I've never heard of it.
A realist, objective framework, then how can you measure evil? How do you do it scientifically? Tell me how.
Notice he throws in the word scientifically, as if one needs to accept the premise of the question. The question, properly phrased, should be, how could you demonstrate evil to be the case under your worldview, or something like that? That's typically how an honest interlocutor would say it. And Tyson may or may not do so. But to throw in that you must do it by science is not necessarily the case. Not all atheists believe that you can do it. Harris is a view that you need science, or that you can do it with science, but that's not the most widely held view. So why would you sort of strawman or shoehorn in a claim that Tyson, you don't even know if that's Tyson's view? I could say to you, why don't you believe that Jesus resurrected?
Thank you.
Why don't you believe that there's another prophet after Muhammad, or something like that? Right?
That is what I was just going to say. That is the crux of the matter here. He's sort of projecting. He's this is like he's squeezing this in there, and then he's making it sound as though this is a fact. It is not. It is him who is bringing these people up. It is him who is looking at the arguments and then saying, well, there's something wrong here. This is the whole problem of the matter. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. He doesn't say, this is what Dr. Tyson says, and this is why this refers to that and that. He doesn't do that. He is talking about totally different things, implying somehow that this somehow refers to him. But it doesn't. He doesn't show this. So for me, this is totally ridiculous.
If Tyson made the argument that science was the way to do so, then he would have an argument. At least Harris has got an argument for it in his book. Most people don't feel like that's strong enough for a moral realist view. But at least it's an argument, right? But you don't even know if Tyson is that view, and to show that word in, I think, is disingenuous. If I were responding to this, I'd say, hang on a moment, I don't accept the premise of your question. At any point did I suggest that science is the way to come to moral truth? Did I at any point say this? Why would you strawman that or presuppose that? That seems to me intellectually dishonest. So let's rephrase the question more neutrally, more charitably, which is, how might you come to an idea about moral truth in the world? Do you think that there are moral truths as a realist, or are you an anti-realist? And how's your moral system set up? But again, that's, unless you could show a contradiction in the worldview, all you could say is, oh, well, I've got a different worldview to mine. Now, if you could show that Tyson or somebody else had a contradiction, that's something they should take seriously. But do you think he's actually going to argue that there's a contradiction in Tyson's view? No, he can strawman it and try and find some contradiction, but he doesn't even know the full extent of Tyson's view, so he couldn't possibly argue against it until he's heard it.
Because the truth of the matter is, most atheists come to the conclusion, including your friend Sam Harris, and maybe he's your friend, Richard Dawkins, that actually evil doesn't exist.
That is absolute nonsense, at least for Harris. Harris is a moral realist. He thinks there are moral facts of the matter, and they can be discovered by science. Either you haven't read, you've forgotten, or you're just being intellectually dishonest. Now, I'm not sure about Dawkins, about whether he's a moral realist, but that's the exact opposite position that Harris holds. So you obviously haven't, and this is why with hijab, you've got to go, and if you know who he's referring to, then I can immediately say that. If you don't, it behooves us, as Stops did earlier, to bring up Epicurus, because whoever this guy quotes, he's likely misquoting, or he's cherry picking or quote mining somebody, and you're very unlikely to get an accurate representation of what that person says or the context they're in. So with hijab, here's one thing to remember for all of us who are listening: go and fact check the quotes that he makes, because I know for a fact that he's mistaken about Harris. Dawkins, I'm not sure. Somebody in the comments hopefully could look that up and find out if Dawkins is a moral realist and what his view is on morals. I'm not sure.
The thing is that I have made several videos where I've taken hijab apart, and I've looked at his claims, I've looked at his quotes, I've looked at what he says about what other people are saying, and I found that he does not, in 80% of the cases, he does not even understand what that person is saying. He does not even understand the philosopher that he is quoting, what that philosopher is saying. And a lot of times, and I would say this is like 40% of the time, he is actually misunderstanding it to the extent that he is saying the opposite of what the philosopher is saying. This is terrible. This is awful. And I've said this many times. I've even sent him a message. I said, listen, why don't you first check what you are saying? Because you're really embarrassing yourself. You're really making yourself look stupid by doing this, where anybody who is just looking. Remember in Cosmic Skeptic, where he says the chapter of paragraph 4 or the fourth chapter is called blah blah blah. And then Cosmic Skeptic says, no, I don't think so. Yes, it is. I know for a fact that this is the case. Everybody can see this, and this is this. And then Cosmic Skeptic says, well, I have the book, and I remember reading it, and that is not what the title is. And then somebody in the audience went and looked at the book online and found chapter 4 and said, no, hijab, that's not the title of the chapter. You are totally wrong. Do you think that he apologized? Do you think that he acknowledged even that he was wrong? Not a chance. But as soon as anybody checks him, he's out.
That is all pitiless indifference, in the words of Richard Dawkins. It's all pitiless indifference. There is no good, there is no evil, he says. It's all pitiless indifference. Nietzsche said the same thing.
Why are you throwing your hand around? How is this in any way relevant to Tyson? Do you think that just rambling this that's not relevant to the particular argument is somehow impressive? I appreciate you have gullible audience members who love this tough talk by the lion here who's barely a kitten. But do you think anybody who's paying attention, like the rest of us here, are impressed by this? No, it actually counts against you for anybody who's looking at this objectively or who's looking at this with a critical or nuanced eye. Your audience members love it, of course, because they're blinded and hypnotized. But the rest of us, you come across as very weak when you do this. You're not putting forward an argument. Your hand gestures, your fake confidence in your inabilities doesn't impress or interest us particularly.
It's almost like you got a degree from Dr. Zakir Naik University, where he learned how to picking bullshit out of his ass.
Yeah, I don't know if he's actually studied anywhere. Who knows? But, if somebody could study at Oxford and just be a very poor student, right? So the fact that somebody either maybe have gone to a prestigious place, which I doubt he's gone to, but that whether you go to a prestigious place or not, right, you can either be a good or a bad student. So it doesn't matter whether one went to Oxford or not. You could have been a dropout at Oxford. That doesn't say much. What we are looking for and what is demonstrated when somebody opens their mouth is whether A, they understand the topic, B, they've got a good argument to see whether they can substantiate their argument. And at the moment, of course, we haven't seen that. What we are seeing now is a bit of rhetoric here to fill the airtime and to impress the gullible and the ignorant. But it's not good for us.
Said the same thing. The actual clever people, and I actually exclude from that the new atheists, but those philosophers, yes, who at least knew something about how.
Because I forgot something just now, and I was muted while I was talking. The thing is that he says that Professor Dawkins says that there is no evil, there is no good. Now, I wish he would have given us the source where Professor Dawkins says this, because I do not recall ever having read anything by Professor Dawkins where he says this. And I would love to go and look this up, but he doesn't give us a source. And now to go and find this one sentence in all the books, I don't know. Oh,
okay, I haven't looked at it there. Dave's put a link in. That's just as to whether he's a moral realist. Sorry, Dave, I can't click on it there. So maybe you can post just a brief part of that that'll tell us whether he is or isn't. That's just interesting to know anyway. So I'm not sure. I have heard him say, or it might be in one of his books, about this pitiless indifference. But again, that doesn't say in and of itself.
Yeah, Yeah, but hang on. Oh, fuck. This is in the context of biology. This is in the context of evolution, where this is what we should be seeing, but we are not really seeing this. There you are correct. If you're looking at the evolutionary process doesn't care about evil, good, or bad, or whatever. This is correct, but not when it comes to the human mind.
Somebody wanted to ask me a question in the text there, so maybe the person can type out the question and stop so Nick can pick it up as well.
How arguments work. They conceded, for the most part, these postmodernist philosophers, that evil doesn't exist in the first place. So you have a
No. Where did you get that idea from? If you look at the full survey papers, moral realists think that there is evil in the world in the sense that something is right or wrong. If that's what you mean by evil, that there are in fact, bad things, the majority of philosophers, and we can quickly look it up here, and I'll tell you like in 1 second, full paper survey here, I will tell you now in 1 second, because I can bring it up and we could even share screen if we needed to here. Where's the survey results? Here it is. You can take my word, or I'll post the link. Actually, here's the link so that people can go do it, because what we do is post links if we try to make claims about certain things. There's the link in there. There's the example. And the where is the argument about this? Where is realism? So meta-ethics, moral realism or moral anti-realism. And 56% of philosophers who were surveyed out of about 900, 56 lean towards or accept moral realism. So the majority of at least philosophers in the full papers are moral realists. They do think that evil exists, that good and evil, or good and bad exist, good and evil exist in the world as real things. So you're just, again, factually incorrect. I don't know how many incorrect things you've said at the moment, but it's certainly stacking up here.
Tall order, my friend. To even prove that evil exists in the first place is a tall order.
No, it's not. If the moral realists do it, 56% of people think there are, and they've got, well, I haven't seen a convincing argument for me, but there are philosophically arguments for the fact that evil does exist in this world. And the fact that you or other people need to bring up theodicies means that you acknowledge that there's some evil in the world and that you think that it's outweighed by the good. But this is not a problem for atheists to put that argument forward. I personally don't think that evil exists as a fact of the matter, but that's just my view. I'm not saying that I hold the majority view or indeed that I'm correct, but other people do. Very smart people like Graham Oppie, Australian philosopher, and others. So again, your factual statement isn't correct.
What is evil? Is it privation? What is it?
Well, it's the absence of good, obviously. I mean, that's obviously a bit tongue-in-cheek. But it's, well, in my view, and I don't know about everybody else, but it's something that unnecessarily moves us away from human well-being. That's what I would consider evil. Unnecessarily is the key word there.
Is it suffering? How do you prove that suffering is evil on an empirical, materialist?
Oh, well, we could say whether you accept it or not. Again, what depends what you mean by the word prove. But I could say that we're humans with a certain biology, that we have evolved in such a way that we move away from pain and towards pleasure. And by that lights, given the biology that we have, we would suggest that evil or pain or bad or suffering is something that we move away from. And that's what we label as bad, or in some cases, evil. And so it's given our biology. If we were beings that couldn't be in any way harmed and we lived forever or for thousands of years, and every time somebody slapped you, it was akin to somebody giving you a kiss, then of course it wouldn't be evil. So it's precisely because we have the biology and the makeup that we do, that at least some philosophers say that we can make this, and that's indeed what Harris says as well, right? And that's an empirical basis of observation out there. I'm not saying that it's objective, by the way, but I'm saying that's how you can make an argument for it. Now, again, all we have to ask Hijab is, what do you mean by proof? Because he won't accept that as proof. But that's why you key with these sort of people to understand what they accept when they ask for evidence or proof or whatever the case is. So once you provide it like I have, you need to establish that first. Otherwise, giving them anything is a waste of time. They're just going to reject it. I don't accept that as proof. Well, what do you accept as proof?
But I've had a couple of Muslims ask me, what is it exactly? Give me a definition for evil. They have a huge problem because for them, the devil is evil, and that is all that they can imagine. They don't have this concept of evil as in a human being. Because for me, Muhammad was a really evil guy. Because you don't just go and torture people, you don't light a fire on somebody's chest just to have them go and tell you where the gold is. For me, that is evil. They have a problem with that because they cannot go and attribute evil to an action that was performed by a Muhammad. So how are they going to find the definition for evil if they have so many examples of evil within their prophet and within the Quran so that they can't use it? So there's a huge, potential source of confusion here.
Oh, what did I do there? Sorry about that. I've just clicked on the wrong button, and how do we get out of that? Sorry about that.
Just use the back button.
Yeah, it's disappeared. It's just not on the screen here. Maybe
Can you go back?
Like yeah, maybe I'll do it like that.
Okay.
There we go.
Called naturalistic or physicalistic worldview. How? I don't think you can.
Well, I've just given you
So
one.
you want your cake and eat it both. You want to be a physicalist, materialist, atheist.
Not everybody is that. So again, you've got to ask the person, what view do they take? Not everybody is a physicalist or a materialist. So again, address the atheist you're speaking. You don't know what Tyson's view is, but you can straw man it. You can just select a view and then attempt to knock it down and then pat yourself on the back. But you haven't even asked, or you don't even know. And again, if you were really going to critique Tyson, you try and find this out. You maybe even email him. Here's what Neil deGrasse Tyson said. Okay, I'm now going to challenge this on a video. Okay, now you've done some homework. You haven't done any of that. You're just bringing up your own example and you're running with that.
Theist who operates not only on methodological naturalism, but on a metaphysical naturalism.
Rob, just hang on a minute. I never get tired of this. The funny thing is, the people don't really understand that an atheist is just somebody who does not do what the theist does, and that is believe that gods exist. Now, that is the only thing. But you have people who make claims, people who believe things, who are also atheists. This is the difference. I don't know why they conflate like an atheist philosopher. No, you get philosophers who are atheists and philosophers who are theists. Absolutely. So people can be either. So you can't say atheists equal this. No, you can't. You have to say people who are atheists can also be this and this. You cannot equivocate, or you cannot put an equal sign behind atheist and then put something there. You cannot. Because it's only a single attribute and everything else is a person who is an atheist who can then have different flavors. This is what people need to understand, that you cannot do this to the word atheist. And I don't understand why they want to, why this is such a knee-jerk reaction that they want to come up with this sort of putting different attributes behind the atheist.
I think because they think of it a bit like theirs, right? A theist, he has all the attributes of a theist, so he has all the attributes of an atheist. I would say that there's a couple of inferences that all atheists would have to accept, and one is that obviously we don't get morals from a supernatural God. If we don't believe in a God, there are certain entailments, but many atheists have different views on a variety of topics. So there'd be a few things that are in common, but then you'd have to highlight those few. But the best thing to do is ask an atheist about their views and so forth, and you can challenge that specifically, because not all atheists are the same.
Philosophical naturalism, and yet you want to make metaphysical claims about evil and suffering, and you want to use those against
It's not
theists?
metaphysical. Evil is not metaphysical. I'm sorry. What is he saying? What is wrong with this guy? No, you cannot do this. You cannot say that evil has a metaphysical claim to it. No, you cannot do that. I don't understand
I think what he's referring to, or possibly what he's referring to, is an internal critique against the theist, which is, hey, there's this metaphysical claim that God is omnibenevolent, all good or all just or all merciful or whatever the case is. But we do notice empirical facts about the world that seem to contradict this. So the facts about the world have a bearing on the metaphysical attributes of God. I think that would be the way to do it. And I think that's a stronger way for us to do it. So we go, hey, if I was a Muslim and I thought God is all just or all merciful or all good or whatever terms you want to you put on that, I can look at the world around me to see whether, in fact, I think that that is more likely to be the case. And if I look at the world and I go, hang on, I notice all this unnecessary suffering that for which there isn't good reasons, and for which we could easily imagine a better way of it being done, and nothing, there's no harm is done in the sense of like it doesn't thwart God's will or intentions, then the theist like Hijab has got some work to do to answer this. And like I say, the evidential problem of evil, and specifically against animals, I think is a very powerful argument. And so that would be one of my go-to arguments against these guys, because none of the arguments that they would use for humans, it's a test, you're going to go to heaven or whatever the case is, and you've got free will and all the rest of this, that doesn't apply to animals. And so that's why I think animals just cuts through a lot of this bollocks and gets straight to the heart of the matter, and it's much easier for people to see.
Do you see what Thinking Clearly has done?
Yeah, he got
because
Mackie
he said
wrong.
earlier that he will bet that he got Mackie wrong, and he actually went and checked. Thank you very much. He said the Abrahamic God is positively irrational based on the problem of evil. Okay,
There we
now
go.
I can't
Thank you very
remember
much for that.
But I
Much
can't remember what he
appreciated
said, what Mackie said. You see, now we'd have to go and check that.
We can go look back again, but I think he said something about that. Mackie said that it isn't a problem that God is evil. But in fact, Mackie's view here, it doesn't discount God, but in fact, Mackie seems to suggest from the thing that Thinking has put up there that that God is positively irrational based on the problem of evil. So that, in fact, is exactly the opposite view of what Hijab claimed that he did. So it's always good to check what Hijab says. Don't take anything, even verses that he claims in the Quran, right? We've caught him out before looking for the verses that he quoted in the Quran, and we couldn't find them at the place that he did. And so we again, I think the biggest takeaway here is check anything. If you don't take anything Hijab says when he quotes the Quran or anybody else to be a factor, that don't be charitable. He's shown that he's not one to take charitably. And so we just need to ask, what's the evidence for that? Right, let's stop here. Let's check if what you're saying is true. And more often than not, it's not accurate, or it's cherry-picked or quote mined.
Yeah, I would actually love to see Hijab go on someplace like Joe Rogan or something where they can actively fact check what he says, because a lot of his quotes and stuff that he's saying now is false, and I think he's hiding behind his own videos.
But you need somebody like myself. I'm not the best at it, but you need somebody like myself. Stop spamming, maybe ask yourself, or some very strong interlocutor against him. Because what he's good at is using rhetoric to try and get out of it. He makes a claim, he's shown to be wrong, and there'll be some other bollocks and ramblings that goes on to try and avoid that, to try and skip past that and hope that everybody ignores the mistakes that he's made. And so you need a strong interlocutor to hold him to account and go, are you going to concede? We're not proceeding any further till you concede this. Are you conceding that you're wrong? You said X, here's what it says Y. Are you conceding you're wrong? Okay, at this point, we're done. You're now intellectually dishonest if you're not going to concede that point. You've got to hold him to account. And this is the standard that he does to other people. I wouldn't be that strong necessarily on other people. I still ask them, and so forth. But with somebody like this, you've got to meet him at that level. Good morning from Australia, Facebook user. Facebook user as well. By the way, if you go and add there should be a link in the video at the bottom, if you're on Facebook, where there's a link like Facebook.com/StreamYard. And if you go there and activate that or allow that, then we can see your name if you want your name. Otherwise, it comes up as anonymous. So you've got to do that the first time you go into a video on Facebook and allow it to take your picture and your name if you want it to be shown up.
See the inconsistency in your understanding. But what I actually do think is you're just a parrot.
Isn't that ironic? Isn't that ironic? From the king of parrots himself, or somebody that doesn't think very deeply, or whatever the case is. Now, of course,
what a nice photo you picked.
But also remember this, guys. He's going to provide a very good argument. Now, let's wait with bated breath. He's going to give us a syllogism, and he's going to give us, a valid and potentially sound argument that we can take on and really sink our teeth into. So let's just wait for this argument and see what happens, shall we? With bated breath.
Just a parrot. You don't have anything to say. You don't have any way to advance the discourse. You needed to answer the question in any which way. You needed an excuse to deny God's existence. So you just parroted what you heard from the new atheists.
And this guy needs any excuse to preach God's word.
Well, there we go. I mean, wasn't that a substantial argument for anybody? Is anybody here convinced by that rambling rhetoric and assertions that can be that can be asserted without evidence and we can hand wave away just as quickly. Thanks for your subjective, unsubstantiated opinion. Now, are you going to tell us something interesting and informative, or are you just going to ramble on with something that is completely irrelevant and uninteresting?
Might have read, like in this small, insignificant book by Graham Oppy.
Graham Oppy is considered one of the better philosophers in the modern day. The fact that Graham Oppy did a small book is to be commended. Sometimes the philosophy is very deep and complex, and Graham Oppy's book, although I haven't yet read it, I have been told about it, does present some arguments against God that the lay person can understand, and we are lay people. So the short book, rather than going into deep, sometimes complex philosophical arguments, is exactly what I and I hope other people would be looking for. So his critique as if Graham Oppy is that's somehow a bad thing, given his short essay that he called a book, that was a long rambling response that, Stops and I read through. I can't remember. I think we did do some of it online. I think this is the pot calling the kettle black at the highest level. A professional philosopher of over 20 years, he's critiquing the fact that he's got a short book when his rambling essay that he called a book is so insubstantial that it's barely worth looking at. The irony here is just, again, unmissable.
With all due respect, arguments against God, about 100 pages. And the only positive argument against God that he does provide is this pathetic argument or problem of evil. This is actually the only positive.
We need to check that as well. So if anybody's got it, if you can look up the 100-page book on Graham Oppy, just have a look if that's the only argument. I'm not sure if that's the case, but I know that Graham Oppy is one that puts forward the problem of evil. I think it's the evidential problem of evil, but just see if there's other arguments in there anyway. If there isn't, well, then the 100-page book is actually probably quite good in going into more in-depth responses to this, because presumably what I would expect is him giving the argument, giving perhaps his response, and giving other counter responses, because this is almost like a chess game, and somebody who understands the topic well will tell you what the most common and probably the strongest arguments are against whatever he says, because that tells us that he's been deep into the topic. I don't think the problem of evil is good for X, Y, and Z reason, but here we go, audience members. Here's how people will typically respond to my response, and here's how I would respond to theirs, and potentially goes on like that. So what we're looking for, though, is his 100-page book, and is his 100-page book the one that only has the evidential problem of, or is it in fact the evidential problem of evil? And is that the only argument in that 100-page book? So if somebody could have a look, I know Graham Oppy has got many other arguments. I just want to check whether in fact he's got more than one argument in that book, or is Hijab wrong about that again? That's why we have to check everything Hijab says.
Is this on fill papers? Because I'm seeing here arguments for atheism on fill papers.
I don't know if that's the book or whether that's a paper, but if it's 100-page, I mean, we can have a look.
I can't see.
I haven't got time, but people could go onto Amazon and have a look at Graham Oppy and see which books he's got, and because you can also see on there how many pages a book has got, and if you find one around 100 pages, that's likely, because again, Hijab hasn't obviously told us which book, so that makes it harder for us. But again, if we're diligent people, we'll go and look it up and see what the book says, and there'll be a little bit there, a little bit of blurb on the book that says what the book includes. But I'm encouraging us now, because Hijab has shown that he's not one to be taken charitably. We should check these things.
Positive argument that you atheists have for why God doesn't exist, and see how fumble it is, if weak and feeble it is.
Because you say so, or have you got an argument against it, or is it just again your unsubstantiated opinion? For the umpteenth time, whatever can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed. So why should we take you seriously? But by all means, give us your opinion, because we just love hearing opinions. Again, yes, he uses many arguments, but I'm thinking specifically of the one, this book that Hijab is supposed to be speaking about. But we just love Hijab's unsubstantiated opinion. That this is just definitely interesting and substantial for us.
See how you're fumbling all over the place?
Who are you talking about? Yourself, probably? But just perception is projection, my man.
Is really the argument that you have? Listen, my friend. We believe as Muslims that this life is a test.
Well, thank you for telling us something that those of us that have looked into Islam just a little bit understand. And how would you demonstrate what it is? How's that falsifiable? Tell me what would need to be the case such that you would agree that life is not a test. I've asked this. Do you think I've had I've barely had a coherent response. I cannot remember a response where I went, that's interesting. That's a falsification criteria that would be the case, that it wouldn't be a test. A test is just one of these unfalsifiable things. Lovely. Thank you.
We believe in purpose and value. We believe that there's a choice to make. And the fact that there is if you believe in it in the first place, if you're a compatibilist or a libertarian from the philosophical perspective, in free will, that we have a choice to make.
Well, compatibilism doesn't think of free will in the same way as libertarianism does anyway. Libertarianism is the idea that you actually have, you are the thinker of your thoughts. In other words, that you are not influenced from the outside. And, you know, that view is that's a very minor view these days, even if you look at the full papers. That view, if I have a quick look here, just to tell you, here we go. Libertarianism, 13%. Compatibilism and other outweighs that by a combination of that 73%.
Wow.
So libertarianism is a very small group of people. Compatibilism is the biggest view, but compatibilism is the idea that there is a determined world, but that if you generate your own actions based on whatever thought comes in your head, basically, and you then have a choice. So you have the freedom to decide what choice to make, even though you don't have the freedom to think your thought. And that is the majority view, but that's not the same as libertarianism. In fact, they're kind of on opposite ends of the fence.
And the fact that we have free will is indicative that there's a choice to be made. And that.
Thank you for telling us about your view. How are you in any way now, in any part, talking about Tyson's view? I mean, you've strawmanned it, you've misunderstood it for most of this video, and now you're telling us about your view. Who cares about your view? Why should we take your view seriously? But by all means, give us a substantial argument for why anything you've said about your view now should be taken seriously. I'm waiting for one argument in this 7.5 minutes, almost 8-minute video.
And that is the world that we live in. This world is a test. The Quran says, هو الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا.
Why should anyone care what the Quran says?
Notice what he says, chapter 67. He doesn't quote the verse now. Let's see if he quotes the verse. Maybe somebody could look it up in chapter 67. I know I'm asking other people out there, but it keeps everybody busy. See if there's anything about it. Let's hear what he says in English now in chapter 67. He doesn't give us the verse.
He is the one who created life and death to test which of you are best in deeds.
How's that a test? And so what? That's a trivial statement. Any creator can do that. So why should I be impressed about that?
So this is a testing ground. This life is a testing ground. For you, with all due respect, this life...
Yeah, you're definitely showing respect there. If that's how you show respect, I'd hate to see when you're disrespectful.
Life is not, it's just atoms floating about.
Yeah, thank you for your uncharitable reductionist view. And you are governed by a celestial dictator that you can't even establish whether he's a good or an evil God. See, I can also play that. In fact, mine is more accurate than your reductionist, uncharitable view.
And Rob, this is 67 right in the beginning. Blessed is he in whose hands is the sovereignty, who has power over everything. He who created death and life to test you as to which of you is better in conduct. He is Almighty, the forgiving. He who has created 7 hairs and hooves and so on.
And how do you establish who's better? How do you establish that? Right? What does better actually mean in that case? None of this is
what is good conduct? If you slap your wife, is that good conduct? If you rape a female slave that is married, is that good conduct?
Yeah. Or subjugate other people when they haven't done anything.
Difference between you and a slab of meat that you see in the butcher shop.
Any atheist could provide you. I won't waste too much time here giving arguments. But again, this is such an uncharitable reductionist view. And again, right, what this does do, though, it shows you whether the interlocutor that you're speaking to is either knowledgeable, charitable, or wants to have, a nuanced discussion. When you hear stuff like this reductionist view, you either think that they are clueless or they're uncharitable. But either way, they're not an interlocutor to take particularly seriously.
Yeah.
The idea that there's of course there's a difference between us and a slab of meat in the butcher. We have consciousness, we have feelings, etc., etc. We can go into a whole bunch of things that are difference between us and a slab of meat. So
I've never had a slab of meat compose an aria or an opera.
You are just composed of the same kind of atoms and material. A snowman that you can hack down with an axe.
You just enjoy your straw man. Keep going here. Maybe you'll burn it over and you'll pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, no, I gotta ask.
Strut away as if you said something substantial.
Yeah, no, I gotta ask, how is this related to what Neil deGrasse Tyson said in the first place?
He's off on a rant here, and he's loving his straw man. You can see he's loving this. These straw men are easy to knock over, aren't they, Hijab? Man, you must have fun. But then you come up against a steel man, you'll walk headfirst into it and just knock yourself out. And you wonder what the hell hit you.
That on the naturalistic world order is just a rearrangement of atoms. And this is your worldview.
Yes, this is some straw man's worldview that you haven't even spoken to at all. But keep telling us that it's somebody's worldview, because you're such an intellectually charitable and honest fellow, aren't you?
Yeah,
Naturalistic
I gotta
worldview.
wonder, one second, did Neil deGrasse Tyson tell him this was his view, or is this...
No, of course not. He's just making the shit up as he goes along. To be uncharitable and reductionist as possible, because these straw men, they're just the easy things to knock over. And his gullible audience will clap along like, yeah.
Yeah, I got ADHD and I thought I was bad. This guy's worse than me. He needs a doctor.
You have no idea, my man. And he's not getting better, by the way. It just gets worse over time.
Devoid of the teleos, the purpose, or devoid of any purpose at all. You can decide to continue living like that and deceiving yourself.
Well, you haven't demonstrated that it's a deception, but anytime you actually want to make an argument, Hijab, some point in this lifetime, you know what? I think there's an actual infinity. And you know what it is? Waiting for Hijab to provide a valid and even potentially sound argument. That will be an actual infinite that will happen in this world. I'm a believer in actual infinites, and it's waiting for Hijab to provide a substantial argument and not give us this rambling rhetoric that sounds like he's preaching, as if anybody would take this seriously. His gullible audience, they will be clapping along like, little kipper things or whatever. It's sad, though, to see that people actually, but at least there's a few Muslims that don't take him seriously. I'm hoping that through these sort of videos, other Muslims will start to not take him seriously. And by the way, if you are a Muslim watching this, that doesn't mean that Islam is false because this guy is clueless or uncharitable. It just means don't take him particularly seriously. Go find somebody that's better than that, come forward with an interesting argument, be charitable to your interlocutor, and that's the way to have discourse, not like this clown.
And masquerading as some kind of intellectual. You're not an intellectual. Leave the history.
Oh, well, obviously Wikipedia and all of the universities and all of the distinctions he's got say otherwise in his field of expertise. But by all means, if you don't think that's a public intellectual, then clearly there can't be a public intellectual on this planet that's alive today. So thank you very much for holding the standard that nobody's now a public intellectual by your lights.
But what does Hijab do? Does anybody know? Is he a UPS driver or what does he do?
One sec.
He works with the Sapiens Institute now with these sort of rambling videos because there's a lot of gullible Muslims that sadly take him seriously, and I think that's his quote job, to ramble rhetoric online.
So he gets paid for that?
Apparently.
Oh my God.
The history and the philosophy to those who do it. Stick to whatever you do for a day job.
Well, just remember, take that example and use it yourself. In fact, if your day job is Sapiens, then you need a new job. Maybe it's being some sort of bad comic or something like that, or begging on the side of the road with pencils and a teacup, as Hitchens used to say.
And get out of our business.
What business? What business is it of yours? And who said you own any business at all? Your business of theology. Well, when you can demonstrate something substantial, you in particular, I'm not even speaking about other Muslims now, come and speak to us. But that actual infinite is probably going to manifest itself.
If you don't want to learn, you're going to have to now. If you don't want to...
Oh, because you said so. At least he's not going to learn from you. So, Dr. Tyson, if you do take advantage here, we know that you would learn and continue to learn. And, you acknowledge the stops. There's something there that perhaps you made a mistake on. But that's because he was polite. He probably showed you a reference or talked about it. But somebody like you hasn't provided anything substantial. You're the last person. In fact, if you were the last person on earth, I would go, no, I'd rather be ignorant than try and learn from you.
Want to go and humble yourself and learn on these issues and actually think and contemplate them?
Well, you do the same first before you tell other people to do it, you hypocrite. See, I can also do that, right?
Now you can go home and think about what we've just said.
You too, buddy. You too. I hope this was a message for you. I hope you listened back to this. This is a message for Hijab now being played back by Hijab himself. Listen to your own message.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And there we go.
Yeah, I think he's storing a lot of repressed sexual energy.
Unbelievable. Unfucking-believable. Okay, but it was well worth it. There's a lot to take away from this.
I'll be back in one sec,
Nick,
so you guys give us a follow-up there or a
yeah,
closing
Nick,
statement.
I
I'll be
would
back
like
shortly.
you to tell us a little bit about what you know about Dr. Tyson.
So yeah, for me, I actually visited the Haddon Planetarium, and when it comes to it, I actually read both Astrophysics for People in a Hurry and Astrophysics and its applications for, I forgot the exact title of it, but I read both of Neil deGrasse Tyson's books, and I have to say he's never claims that he is an atheist. He never even questions the existence of God. What he does question is that if it needs to essentially just, there needs to be a lot more research happening on that side where it can be explained in a method that is somewhat accurate in a scientific way. And his first quote is that the universe has no obligation to make sense to you. So in his epilogue in one of his books, he does mention that if there is a higher power or whatever that is creating something, there's no need for it to make sense to us in a physics way, because there's a lot of stuff in physics that we don't quite understand just yet. But the way that the interview is done, I personally believe it's just a cut up, highly edited portion of the interview, and Hijab just going off of a 2-minute statement and basically attacking everything Neil deGrasse Tyson did. I honestly take a huge issue with that.
But would I be correct in saying that I think that Dr. Tyson goes out of his way not to say that God doesn't exist? He goes out of his way to say, no, I do not want to disprove gods. No, I do not want to take on the atheist label. Would I be correct in saying those things?
Yes, he says that quite a bit in his book.
Because I heard him say, look, yes, you could say I'm more of an agnostic than anything else, because for sure that I don't have the knowledge that a God exists or doesn't exist, but that's as far as I will go. He says, I just simply couldn't care. I am more concerned with finding out about the universe instead of talking about make-believe things where people argue about these God things, where there's so many different gods. What is the point of arguing about it when we have the universe to worry about? This is what I've heard him say. So, none of that makes sense if you're listening to Hijab.
Yeah, and like when I remember in this, I think it was with Joe Rogan that he said it, that he couldn't give less of a shit because he's a cosmologist and people just like to ask scientists these questions. So when they ask and he doesn't want to be rude, he gives a small answer here or there, but he never denies the existence of God. He never even wants to debate it in the first place, and he always wants to just stay in his lane of teaching, educating in science. And the fact that he's always misquoted and such, even though he wants to keep his nose out of it, or people are always trying to pull him into this, I kind of find sad in a way.
But then, what is the motivation of Hijab to make this video where Dr. Tyson is in no way, and this is in air quotes, the enemy? Why would he do this?
Well, I just think that Hijab's like wanting to debate someone, and he's trying he's an attention whore essentially. He's looking for attention, or the biggest, baddest person in the prison to go debate. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is a really popular scientist, so he's probably trying to rope in Dr. Tyson for a debate or something. But I honestly don't see that.
I think you're right. He's tried that with Joe Rogan. He's tried that with Tyson. He's tried it with a couple of other people, trying to bait them so that they would have a debate. I mean, he's a nobody. He's not even a pseudo-intellectual. I think that's being too charitable. I'm being overly charitable there. So he's tried this with a few other people because he wants to make a name for himself. Because again, right, he's appealing to the gullible audience. Remember what this is. This is not, unless he's utterly delusional, which is quite probably the case, or possibly the case, should I say. He's not trying to convince people like us, right? Because we can see through this rhetoric and this nonsense. Like, it's utterly transparent. What they are trying to do is keep the Muslims in the fold, right? Because as soon as Muslims start to think critically, as ex-Muslims attest to, then they start to leave Islam. So the idea here is to try and keep the gullible Muslims in the fold. And many of them love this sort of rhetoric, this sort of back and forth. It's a bit like verbal jousting. They don't really pay attention to and don't know the nuance of the content of what's being discussed. But as long as the man sounds like he's beating his chest. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It immediately thinks, it reminds me of Troy. I don't know if you've seen the movie Troy with Brad Pitt, that very beginning scene, right, where the two armies come together, and the king is, boasting, and he brings out his man who's this huge hulking guy, and obviously they call for Achilles, and they have to go and find him because he's laying in a hut somewhere, and he doesn't really pay much attention to the king, and this big guy thinks he's the main guy, and of course Achilles, kills him in no time. He dodges a couple of things and kills him like it wasn't even worth the battle. And this is sort of Hijab here banging his chest there. But when he comes up against anybody, and I'm nobody special, he just gets exposed, for the charlatan that he is, really.
Yeah,
Other people,
I think,
could do a way better job even than what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think he's just worried that if people start leaving, he won't have anyone left to sell his snake oil to.
Well, I think there's plenty of them, so...
Yeah, but we need to understand that the person who influences all these guys is Tsortzis. Now, Tsortzis showed that if you become overconfident, you get cut down to size very, very quickly. Because Tsortzis was on this trip, this attention-seeking trip, where he went and challenged academics left, right, and center, and they actually tolerated this, and they. I don't know whether they did this out of amusement or whatever, but they actually went ahead and did this. But it became very apparent he did this 3 or 4 times, and he was dismissed. But like really dismissed like a little schoolboy. So the experience that Tsortzis made should also be trickling down to these guys. They should realize, like people like Subur and Hijab, they should realize as soon as you go up against real academics, real intellectuals, you are going to lose out horribly. You're going to suffer like crazy. And I don't understand why they don't learn.
The difference is that I think Hijab Tsortzis has got a bit of self-reflection, at least either then or now. Bit, yeah. And I don't think that Hijab has got that at all. Right? And I see it with other people online as well. There's just little to no, it's non-existent self-reflection and introspection. Could I be wrong, or how am I coming across, or anything like that. Every now and again, he gets told by his Muslims, he gets told off, and I saw him saying something about deleting Twitter or whatever the case is. Sadly, he's still making videos, and he's got 400,000 subscribers, and if even half of them are as gullible and ignorant as we presuppose, that's a very sad thing, right? And again, it's a message to Muslims out there. You can still believe in Islam, but just find better people to follow. This guy is just terrible, right?
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Oh, James just came in. Exactly. This is what I just said, right?
On Discord. Obviously, I've got the Discord link there, so join us on Discord afterwards, and we can continue to chat. I've just got to go do something, so I'll be back in a moment.
All right. Is there anybody else that wants to ask, say, comment, do, whatever? Anyone in the chat? Nothing from you guys?
Yeah. I probably think it'll take them a minute to type. But yeah, I know this video was very... it really showed Hijab's mindset.
Yeah. And this is what James is saying. This is actually quite true. They've learned when debating atheist academics not to argue positively, but merely for theism, and that's it. And they're using a lot of arguments which that they just sort of, they take from the Christian apologists and then sort of just color it with a bit of Arabic or something. So this is what I see a lot as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I honestly want to see this guy. The way that I've seen a lot of videos, especially with him talking about Ayaan Hirsi Ali when she came on the Joe Rogan podcast. I honestly want to see this guy go on Rogan just against Majan Nawaz, or someone who actually knows their shit or knows what they're talking about, and get fact checked by someone.
Oh my God, he slaps them around like crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hijab was wrong on Dawkins being a moral realist. I wonder what Hijab was right. I mean, the funny thing is really, if you go and you check this, you fact check them, it's amazing. Really is amazing. The same with Subor. I did the same thing with Subor when he went on liberalism and he went on different things on biology. As soon as I check what he says, poof, he fails. I think once he said something and we checked it and yep, it was actually correct. Well, maybe he's learning. So then we're doing a good thing here, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, ladies, gents, thank you very much. I've enjoyed today. This was like really nice. I didn't expect it.
Hadith,
And
or
hopefully next week we're going to go for the slavery topic. I don't know whether Smartcat is going to be ready. He said he wants to be really good at this and he needs to prepare for this. I don't know how long he's going to need. I'm not sure this is ever going to happen if he starts, dodging this bullet a little bit. So, yeah. Dawkins wrote the universe has precisely the properties we should expect. If there is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil. That is exactly what I remember. Thank you. That is what I remember. It was in a totally different context.
He would be a moral anti-realist then. But Harris is certainly a moral realist. So there we go. On that note, thank you very much. I guess we're not having a Hadith, but that's all good. We finished spot on 10 o'clock.
There we go. Narrated Abdullah bin Zama. The Prophet forbade laughing at a person who who passes wind. And this is in Sahih Bukhari 87368. So Muhammad did make he actually did say some nice things, you see. Don't laugh at the poor guy if he's farting. And on that note, thank you very much, ladies, gents. We'll see you next Friday. Join us on Discord if you want to discuss Islam a little bit more. And if not, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Stay away from COVID, and we'll see you on Friday. Good night, everybody.
See you guys.
Good night. Thank you.